free. Forde to put them in front. Has he drawn it in too much? Matty Forde has slotted it over. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this.
Hello and welcome along to the Life Changing Moments podcast series on the 42. I'm Fintan O'Toole and we're chatting today with our latest guest in the series, Wexford football great Matty Forde. Now, we've teamed up with UPMC, the official healthcare partner of the GPA and GAA, to produce this Life Changing Moments podcast series. With over 40 hospitals, 700 doctors and 90,000 employees globally, UPMC is providing life-changing medicine to communities across Ireland. To find out more, go to www.upmc.ie. So as I mentioned, Matty Forde is with us, a player who began his Wexford senior football journey back in 1999 and then finished up in 2011. In between, he became one of the most recognisable names in Wexford football, part of a team that contested a league final, Leinster final and an All-Ireland semi-final, and became his county's first and only to date All-Star in 2004. Matty, welcome along and thanks for joining us.
Hi Fintan, how are you?
Matty, you had a good few years in the Wexford senior colours, but what have you gone for as the game or moment that had the biggest impact in shaping your career?
Probably a couple I could have picked out. Maybe playing the first one was as important as any of them, but I went for a championship match against Offaly in Wexford Park in 2004. We were beaten in a Leinster semi-final and we were back home, and I'd say it's probably the biggest Wexford, definitely the biggest Wexford crowd we ever played in front of in Wexford Park anyway, and probably for the duration of my career the biggest Wexford crowd we ever played in front of, full stop. So that's the one I'm going to go with.
So you mentioned the crowd for this game. It's Wexford against Offaly in a football game, but one of the big things I presume is at the time the context of another Wexford Offaly game that took place just before it in the Leinster hurling final. Very
much so. Wexford had played Offaly the previous week in the Leinster hurling final and won, obviously. And I remember being at the game, and I think if I'm right, we were supposed to play that qualifier that weekend, but Offaly actually, I think it was Nevin Coughlin was playing dual at that stage, and they actually conceded home advantage, so the football could be played the following week. So I think we were actually supposed to play that qualifier in Tullamore, or at an away venue at least, the previous week, but we ended up getting home advantage. But obviously, with the cup, with the Bob O'Keefe Cup being brought to Wexford Park, that absolutely swelled the numbers, and there was a huge crowd there that evening. So
there's obviously a really good, I suppose, feel-good atmosphere around the county in terms of GA going into this game. What sort of a situation were you at as Wexford footballers in your season? I mean, the league had gone, like you were competing at a very high level of the league, so you'd been exposed to kind of a lot of the top counties around the country that spring.
It was our first year kind of in Division 1B, I think it was at the time. We retained our Division 1 status comfortably enough that year. So, we'd had 3 games in Leinster that year, which was, I think, a first for, I think, most lads in that panel, if not all. So we'd beaten, I think it was Louth, we'd beaten Kildare and then lost the Leinster semi-final to Westmeath. So we were back into the qualifiers, and it wasn't something that Wexford football had done particularly well, was competing in qualifiers. We kind of, threw our hat at it in a lot of cases. We were out of Leinster and, we'd kind of down tools over the previous few years, definitely, since the introduction to the qualifiers. But, we knew there was going to be a big crowd in Wexford that evening. We had a little bit of momentum from being in Division 1 and getting a couple of wins in Leinster and, narrowly losing to Westmeath to get to the Leinster final. So, we knew there was a big crowd. It was a nice, lovely, bright, sunny evening in Wexford, and, there was a really good atmosphere around, and, the big crowd absolutely, I think, spurred us on as well.
So you joined the Wexford panel at a time when it was the old traditional knockout system, and then you were kind of there at the changeover in football. But I kind of getting the impression that was it a bit of an adjustment for players to get used to, the provincial thing was such a big deal for everyone. And even at this time, Leinster seems such an open championship, in comparison to, I suppose, how much Dublin dominated now. It had been difficult for you as a group to kind of pick yourselves back up after previous provincial disappointments.
Yeah, definitely. And said, we would have concentrated on Leinster an awful lot. So we were going from kind of a straight knockout to then I think it was 2001 was the introduction of the qualifiers, and there was this something new that none of us were ever used to. So we probably were at that stage putting all our eggs in the one basket, which was Leinster. And look, we definitely didn't buy properly into the qualifiers. I definitely hold my hands up and say that I probably could speak on behalf of a lot of the squad at that stage, but Pat Rowe was in charge of us that year, and Pat didn't want us going out on the back of 2 defeats, and he made that very clear. So, looking back, we should have probably put more into the qualifiers in the preceding couple of years. But I think from there on, they were taken fairly seriously, to be fair. And, it was a great route. It was that route that eventually got us to an Ireland semi-final. So, we probably should have been putting in a bit more.
Offaly entered the game on the back of a win over Kildare, so I guess their confidence was kind of high. Was it a strange set of circumstances, the fact that the game went back, or were you thinking at the time, this is good to give us the extra week, and as you kind of mentioned, I suppose you could all head to Dublin to support their hurlers the week before?
Look, it was no harm from our point of view. A lot of our qualifier defeats had come on the back of playing probably 6 days later, which has proven over years over all the years of qualifiers, which is anything but ideal. You're going to play a qualifier 6 days later on the back of obviously having lost, so that's not ideal. So this gave us the extra week, and I remember standing up in the stand after Wexford had won the Leinster final on the Sunday evening. We were heading home, obviously myself and a couple of the other players, and we just said, look, there's probably going to be a buzz around here, and this extra week is certainly not going to do us any harm. Plus, look, we've got home advantage, so that has to be worth something to us as well.
What's it like in a county like Wexford in terms of, like, the club scene seems very strong in terms of football and hurling? There's a lot of kind of dual clubs. Like, did you feel at times kind of maybe in the shadow of the hurlers, maybe in the early parts of your career, or how does it kind of work in terms of the fans' affections in the county?
Look, we definitely would have been and still are. There's no two ways about that. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. The early couple of years I would have played 99, 2000, 2001 along there. I think people would hardly any more than know that there was Wexford were playing championship football, which was a big turnaround, say, come from 2004-5 on, where people really knew what was going on. And in fairness, the football people in Wexford were always hugely interested in. It's a small enough band of people, and probably still is, but they were really, really into it. But I don't think there's any doubt, as I said, no one would disagree that the football always has and probably always will play second fiddle to the hurling. But
this game now that we're talking about, the 2004 qualifier, I was looking at it, there was a 15-minute delay because of traffic problems, and there was a crowd of over 9,000. You obviously have the Bob O'Keefe Cup there, so, and as you mentioned, the fact that it was on in Wexford Park, I mean, there must have been a real sense of occasion to it.
Yeah, we had heard, we were travelling early enough, obviously. We were meeting, I think it was in the Talbot Hotel, early enough that evening for food and whatever, pre-match meeting and that kind of thing, whatever needed to be done. But even going into Wexford, probably 2.5 hours before the game, we were held up in traffic going across Wexford Bridge. So we're saying, Jesus, this is a bit strange, or it's hardly match traffic at this time or whatever. But it was only when we were in the changing room, probably went out to warm up and came back in, that we were told, we were going to be delayed 15 minutes. So I can tell you, for a Wexford football team, this is definitely a first. They might have been delayed before trying to get people in, not waiting for them to come in or whatever. So, it was a bit strange. It was the same for Offaly, obviously. But, we knew there was a kind of dawn on fellas then how big of an occasion it was, I suppose, or how significant it was when something like this was happening.
Is that unsettling for players? You're all geared up to start, and then there's a delay, or because of the reason why it was being put back? Was there a bit of maybe extra buzz and maybe a bit of extra motivation heading into it?
Very possibly, yeah. I remember only speaking very recently on a podcast, just a bit on psychology, and I think if you're properly prepared, I think stuff like that doesn't really bother you. It's only when you're not out 100% prepared, probably either individually or collectively, that it's stuff like that can put you off. But no, look, I think genuinely, I think you can remember, I seen a clip of it here only in the last year where the strangely enough, RT were actually in the dressing room before the game, and there was a great buzz in the dressing room. So that's not something you see anymore, pre-match, where there'd be a camera in the dressing room. But the lads were a fairly light-hearted bunch, so they took it in their stride fairly well.
So the game ends Wexford 214, Offaly 15 points. I mean, you scored 210 out of the 214. I'll read a line out to you from the Irish Independent on the Monday when they give you the Man of the Match award, and they say, when you wear customised boots and bleached hair, you have to prove you can also talk the talk. And Ford's boots spoke volumes. He scored 2-7 of his 210 total from play and with both feet.
I suppose at that stage I had a contract with Adidas, as a good few other hurlers and footballers had at the time. So wearing their boots was one of the things we had to do, which, look, it wasn't a big chore, to be fair. But I think at the time they were silver. So, I got plenty of stick over them. So, the line, in fairness, is probably fairly right. And then regarding the hair, I've got even more hardship over that. So my sister's a hairdresser. So I remember the week of the match, she was kind of half practice, and then she said she wanted to put highlights in my hair. So I said, look, fair enough. So she put them in, but I had to rush off. Little did she know I was going to the gym and going to the pool after it, where she only told me after that it was actually because of the chlorine in the pool, there was a possibility my hair could have turned green. So I was just saying, my jeez, if that had happened, I was in serious trouble. But look, thankfully it all went right, because, what the line is probably right enough. If I hadn't scored or played well, I think probably the hair in the boots and this kind of stuff would have been brought up. But look, thankfully, as to say, all's well that ends well.
So with the attention from the packed house in Wexford Park on the hair and the boots, was it kind of key for you to get off to a good start and hit the ground running?
I was captain of Wexford that year, so I probably, and I've said it before, I probably trained harder that year than ever before. So look, you're just trying to set an example. Talk is cheap, and you're trying to set an example. We had lots of leaders in that team. I just was lucky enough to be the captain because I think Kyle Nairn had put me in that position from winning the championship the previous year. So I was lucky to be selected as captain. You're just trying to, as the actions speak louder than words, and you're trying to lead by that kind of thing rather than talking. And it had a really good National League that year, scoring wise. So look, it was just kind of trying to carry it on. And look, it was one of those events where everything you touch just turns to goal. It doesn't happen too often during your career, and certainly not scoring 2-10 in a championship match doesn't happen too often. So look, it was lovely when it did happen. Because
it wasn't a game where the team got off to a flying start. Just looking at it, Offaly were ahead 8 points to 4, and they'd had a couple of goal chances. So it seems that you kind of start to reel them in, and that as the game progresses, you really get going.
Yeah, we definitely had to build into the game. I remember very early in play, John Cooper made a super save. Then he made another one. 2 outstanding saves. Probably have one of them go in, we're in serious trouble. Or we won 8 to 4 points down, or even 2-8. It's a completely different game. They're probably not coming back from that. And that was a really, really good Offaly team. They were only beaten narrowly by Dublin 2 years later in the Leinster final, and they had a lot of big men, Kieran McManus and guys like that, the Dailies and the McNamees. They were a very, very good team. But we had a lot of good players, obviously. And we had to work our way into the game. And I think there was only a point or two in it at half time, and there was nothing in it. Probably, with 8-10 minutes to go, that game was still there for the take. And I think our second goal probably finished it off a little bit all right.
Talk to me about the goals, because in a game where Offaly scored 15 points, you scored 14, the goals seemed like that they really were key moments in the match. What do you remember of them?
Yeah, there were, and as I say, in tight games, I suppose goals win games, and both of them were very, very similar. I think in the way they were created. The first one, I think puts as a point up. It's just literally a ball. Darren Brown was out under the stand side down the town end of Wexford, and just balloons it up in the air. It's very much 50-50. I think it's Pádraig Kelly was in goal for Offaly, and goals for kind of misjudges it, and I get in behind him and punch it into the goal, and then Cathal Daly punches me for doing it fairly hard. So he does. And the second one actually is quite similar, where I think it's David Fogarty puts a ball across the goal that I challenge Pádraig Kelly for, and the ball literally breaks right in front of me 4 yards out, and he's on the ground beside me, just literally kicking into an empty net. So look at the ball could have went 100 other places, but that was probably the difference in winning and losing the game was getting those 2 bits of luck.
You talk about that the game just ran well for you in the fact you scored 2-10, but it must have been a factor how well you've been playing all year. You might talk to us maybe about your form that year, particularly the league, and I know there's one other special game that kind of stands out in a lot of people's memories that you played that year when you scored 4 goals above Inchum against Galway in a famous win for Wexford at that time that spring. So I mean, you were probably building to this moment, it maybe felt. Maybe
so. As I said, I was captain of Wexford that year, so I actually missed the first game, the first league game away to Armagh, which we lost by a point, I think, or 2. So, I really wanted to, I suppose, make up for it when I did get back playing. So I ended up playing six National League games that year. I think I scored 836 in the six games, obviously including the 4-5 up in Galway that year. So look, I was playing well. The team was playing well, more importantly. And then in our 3 games in Leinster, I'd scored 8 points in each of the 3 games as well. So I wouldn't say that it was coming. The 2, as I said, the 2 goals, there's absolutely a good portion of luck. But you still have to put yourself in the position to score them. I think I took 14 shots on the night. I think 12 of them ended up in scores. So I said it doesn't happen every day or every season even. So when you do, you grasp it with both hands. I know you're saying maybe there's an element of fortune to the goals, but I mean, your point kicking really must have gone up a notch this year, given the amount that you scored in the league. And I mean, you actually finished top scorer in the championship, which is probably quite unusual for a player that didn't get to the All-Ireland semi-final stage, that they finished the top of the charts. Yeah, we actually lost the following Saturday evening. We were put out by Derry, who are something of a bogey team for us for the duration of my time, and I think this to continue to be still. So to go out that early, I'd say it's probably the earliest anyone that's ever went out has won the championship. But yeah, look, I think it was 341 or something like that. I scored. in the championship in 5 games. So look, I was going to give me a shot, but I never thought it was going to end up with me being the top scorer in the championship or winning an All-Star that year. But look, it was one of those years you get on a roll, and you kind of can't stop scoring. As I said, it doesn't happen. It didn't happen every year. So it was nice when it did.
Those accolades, I mean, just to look at the All-Star one, would you have kind of felt, oh, look, I've gone out of the championship too early, I'm not really in the running for something like this? Or, I don't know, do you watch it as the championship progresses and think maybe I'm still in with a shout here?
No, look, genuinely, when we went out, as you said, you have to be getting, in 2008, we won the National League, we won Division 3 of the league, we're beaten in a Leinster final, we're in an All-Ireland semi-final, and we get no All-Star. We have 4 or 5 guys nominated and don't get one. I know that's obviously happened after that. So look, I genuinely wasn't expecting to get one. Having gone out, I think it was in round 4 of the qualifiers, so you're not really expecting to pick up anything at that stage. Look, it had been a good year personally, but I'd rather have went a couple of rounds deeper into the qualifiers. But
it must have been a huge honour and a huge buzz to get it. I mean, I've chatted to Declan Brown before, who'd be obviously a contemporary of yours, and he was saying the Dublins and the Kerrys, obviously these awards come along the whole time, but he viewed it as, almost recognition for all the people that helped him and all the people that were putting a lot of effort into Tipperary football at a time when it wasn't very fashionable. And what you're saying about Wexford football's place in the county, there's kind of similarities you could draw there.
100%. I know Declan and played with him and know him well, and it's exactly the same. It did, there was a great buzz about it. I obviously delighted myself, but just it was nice for the club, who obviously put me in that position. But I think it was recognition for the Wexford footballers as well. Of it's only a few years previous, we were probably in the bottom handful of teams in the country, where now we're competing every year in Leinster with Dublin, with Kildare, with Meath. And I think it was a nice bit of recognition for them as well. But look, personally, sure, look, it's a fantastic honour.
The game itself as well, just to bring you back to it, like the setting, the fact that it was at home. I mean, we've seen over the last couple of years, maybe when the hurling championship system has changed and the home and away thing has been there, like that the place can really come alive in Wexford Park when the county team is going well, in a way that maybe games can get a little bit lost in Croke Park. So it must have been lovely that on the night when you do score 210 in a qualifier, it's in front of your home people. Yeah,
look, it's nice that there is a crowd there, to be fair, absolutely. And to do it at home, I absolutely love playing for Wexford and love playing in Wexford Park. And I remember that even in the second half, we were under pressure for a lot of that first half of that game. But when we eventually got on top and wore them down, the atmosphere in Wexford Park that evening, and after the match, and later on that night, and around Wexford even for a good while after it, the atmosphere, and probably gave Wexford football a bit of a shot in the arm and a shot in the right direction too, and maybe people within Wexford actually start sitting up and taking notice. But it was definitely in Wexford Park. It was kind of a one-off occasion that we had an atmosphere like that.
I know you say you lost out the following week to Derry in the qualifiers after this game, but it definitely seems like the launch pad is something, because the following year you get all the way to the Division 1 League final. And then it's the start of, I suppose, Wexford kind of coming into the national consciousness a bit. And you kind of mentioned that 2008 season. So I guess the point you had made earlier in the conversation, saying that maybe sometimes you didn't take the qualifiers as seriously, you definitely seem to have kind of managed to tackle that problem as your career progressed.
Yeah, look what we did. And in fairness to the likes of Pat Rowe, the likes of Jason Ryan and Paul Beelan, they weren't allowing us just to go out on a whim after losing maybe losing on a Sunday in Leinster, and then we had a horrible run where we headed to Clonus, I think 3 years in a row for qualifiers against Monaghan and Fermanagh, and that's a tough place to go anytime, but the week after losing is not ideal. But I think 2008 was actually 2004 was the first time we actually got 2 weeks between games, and I'm pretty sure it's the first time we actually managed to win a qualifier. So there is something in it where that extra week, you get feeling sorry for yourself out of your system and really put the shoulder back to the wheel. And that's what the likes of those guys I mentioned didn't allow us to do, and drove us on to actually trying to make a bit of progress in the qualifiers. And that's where 2008 came from.
Yeah, it certainly drove you on, this game where you scored 210 against Offaly. We've been talking about it today on the 42's Life Changing Moments podcast series with UPMC, the official healthcare partner of the GPA and GAA. Matty Forde, thanks very much for talking to us.